I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian, and welcome to the Sidebar, a weekly show on the community, arts, culture, and more. Today we're talking with Ned Canty and Dennis Whitehead Darling from Opera Memphis about an upcoming performance, so stay with us for a conversation with Ned and Dennis. And of course, a special thanks to our sponsor for the Sidebar, Tresident Manor. You have an upcoming performance that I will mispronounce because we had to try this a couple times of La Bohème. La Bohème.
Yeah, so
okay,
you got it.
There we go. I got it. All right, we can start for real now. And but who wants to start? That's coming up May 17th and 18th, and we'll talk about that today and talk about the performance. And Dennis, you're the general director, I think, or director.
I'm the stage director.
Stage director.
Ned is the general director.
So I'm the general director of the company.
Okay, general director of the company.
Stage director of the actual production of La Bohème.
Right, and then we'll just talk about Opera Memphis, talk about opera, and talk about everything else. But talk about why this performance now and what's unique about it.
Sure. So this production actually was originally scheduled for the fall of 2020.
Well, why didn't it happen?
We were just lazy and surly.
No reason.
So it's been put off a couple of times. But this was a production that grew out of a series of conversations that we had as a part of our McCleve project, which was just our attempt to really get to understand better how can Opera Memphis be an asset to the entire city? How can we make sure that everybody in the city knows that we are their opera company? Because while Memphis is blessed to have multiple dance companies, multiple theaters, multiple classical music entities in general, as far as opera goes, it's us for 3 hours in any direction. So, trying to ensure that we are meeting the needs of everybody is very important to me. So we had this series of conversations, and one of the questions that arose was, have you ever taken a sort of Hattie Lou or collage approach to an opera and done something with an all-black cast? And the short answer was no. We had never tried that. It was something that we talked about a little bit, and that sort of intersected with my reading the book Beale Street Dynasty and learning a little bit more about Beale Street in the aughts and the teens of the 20th century. Just stuff that I really never knew about how incredibly vibrant, how much art and culture, music, philosophy was really just fermenting right there and then being sent out all across the world. And I think the thing that really sealed the deal for this production and the approach to this production was learning that the composer William Grant Still, who is known as the Dean of African American Composers, first black man to have a symphony at Carnegie Hall, first black man to have an opera at New York City Opera, that in 1915, he was on Beale Street working for W.C. Handy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so you've got the dean of black American composers and the father of the blues working together. And that was astounding to me. And it was a really great parallel to Paris of the 1830s, which is where La Bohème is set. It's about bohemians, right? Young artists living on nothing, struggling to make their art, but also kind of enjoying the struggle, romanticizing it. So it just seemed like a really great crossover.
Yeah. So, Dennis, how did you get involved?
I was actually the first McCleve Fellow back in 2017. And so Ned and I had a prior relationship. And I directed my first opera ever with Opera Memphis. And so when this production came on the board to do, he reached out to me and said, would you be interested? And of course I said, I'd absolutely love to. How often do you get to do a production with an all African-American cast or a cast of color, I should say?
Yeah. How do you for lack of a better word, alter or kind of update or, morph the script or the book? I forget what it's called in opera. I apologize.
It's called the libretto. Just means little book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To like, who did that and how did that all come about in terms of, and how do you do that in a way that you're not making it kitschy? Right? Or maybe that was your point. I don't think it was, though. Like, where it's kind of, it becomes not true to the original, but not true to the vision you have.
That's a really great question. And, this is actually an approach. Almost every serious dramatic opera we do set in the original time period it was set in. So this is a rarity for us. And the reason we're doing it is because we were able to do it really without changing anything. The part of it is that, La Bohème inspired Rent. It inspired Moulin Rouge. But really, any story about young people trying to be artists, that is something that is understood in every century, in every country. And so we really have changed very little. I think that we changed the name of one publication that was a French millenary publication. We turned to the crisis. And some of it is in the surtitles, the translations that run as the music is happening. There's in Italian at one point, they refer to a herring. Well, we will translate that in the titles as skipjack, which is the type of herring that lives in the Mississippi.
Right.
So just those little touches, but this is every note, every word that is being sung is La Bohème as Puccini wrote it.
Yeah, yeah. For you, your role, Dennis, describe your role for those who don't.
So my role is to work with the scenic designer, the lighting designer, the design team to come up with an aesthetic for the piece. And so, of course, this is set in Beale Street in 1915. And so we came up with a design aesthetic for it. And then I'm responsible for moving the singers on stage and working with the chorus.
Yeah. And go back to one thing too I want to explain. Say the name again. McCleve. What is the McCleve program? So for those not familiar with it.
Yeah. So Florence Cole Talbot McCleve was the first Black opera singer to sing on a major stage in Europe. This was 1928. She sang Aida in Italy, home of opera. And she came back to America, and America just wasn't quite there yet. She ended up marrying a dentist from Memphis and moving here, and had, a very, very big influence, taught Carla Thomas, I'm told, lots of influence on Memphis music in general. The fact that I had never heard of her before I moved here was something that caused a lot of curiosity in me and led to a lot of conversations. One of those conversations was around, and I guess in these days where people will critique you for being too woke, I'm going to make a play for the idea that there is a middle ground between being woke and being asleep, right? There is a way to say, for instance, when I asked my friends as a part of these conversations, my friends at other companies, they could all name a lot of Black singers. But when I asked them to name a Black director of opera, not a single one could name more than one. And to me, that is not about trying to be woke. That's about trying to redress a problem. Because especially in a city like Memphis, if it's only people who look like me, 97% Irish and 3% mayonnaise, if it's only people who look like me, we're not actually telling stories as fully as they can be told. So, anyone who disagrees with that and considers it woke, I'm happy to have that conversation in full. But the McCleve Fellowships were a way of saying, how can we identify some young Black artists who would make great directors of opera, but just haven't thought about it because they haven't felt invited in. And so Dennis was someone getting an MFA in directing at University of Memphis, had a lot of experience in theater and musical theater, reads music, plays music, every single skill that you could have to be an opera director, way more of the relevant skill sets than I had when I started. And yet it never had seemed like, until we started having these conversations, it had not seemed like a path that he could follow.
So talk about that. I mean, your background, and then when this opera opportunity came up, was that
terrifying? Yes,
it
absolutely was, because, like Ned said, I had experience in theater and was in a graduate program in musical theater. And I just never thought, I felt that opera was so hard to approach, and I was just terrified of it. I didn't share that terror with Ned when he asked me. I said, yes, of course, I'd love to. And then I got in the car, talked to my husband, and I said, my God, opera, honey, what am I going to do? But fortunately, at the university, there was someone that I could work with who became my sponsor for that in the opera department there. And then, of course, working with Ned, shepherding that experience, he gave me all the rehearsal time I needed to do my first one-act opera. And it was, I fell in love. I had that moment where we're in tech and I'm watching the soprano sing her aria, and I'm mouthing the words, and just, it's like this Pretty Woman moment where she's at the opera, and I was just so in it. And I just remember turning to Ned and saying, Ned, I think I love opera.
And prior to that, what were your thoughts or attitudes about opera?
That it was highfalutin, that it was for the rich, for the wealthy, that you should wear a tuxedo if you go. And it turns out it can be that, but it's
Right.
not.
Yeah.
It's not that.
Yeah, yeah. We're here with Dennis Whitehead Darling and Ned Canty from Opera Memphis talking about the upcoming performance of La Bohème. I think I did it.
Bohème.
I think
You
I did
did
it right.
it.
I just like save it, fix it all in post. And I am Eric Barnes. This is the Sidebar, which airs here on WYXR 91.7 every Thursday at 11:30, focused on the community, arts, culture, and everything in between. Not just a radio show, though. It's one of many weekly podcasts we do at the Daily Memphian, including the Soundbites with Chris Harrington and Holly Whitfield, focused on food and dining and drink, as well as the Memphis Grizzlies podcast hosted by Chris Harrington and Drew Hill. We also have, during political season, we'll have On the Record that Bill Dries and sometimes Sam Hardiman will host. All of our podcasts are on the Daily Memphian site, as well as iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. This show, like Soundbites, is on WYXR, so you can also get it at WYXR.org or download the WYXR app. That includes all the WYXR shows, both talk and music, all the archives. If you like a DJ, you missed the show, all those shows are archived at WYXR and on the app. I should also say WYXR is nonprofit, listener-supported radio, so consider becoming a member and supporting WYXR. If you become a member, there's all kinds of member benefits, swag, all kinds of things you get, or you can just do a one-off donation. And I should also mention that the Daily Memphian is a nonprofit 501c3, very much supported by your paid subscription. So if you're not a paid subscriber, do consider becoming one by going to dailymemphian.com. Coming up soon, I think next week, we're doing a beer show. I just wrote down beer ! Natalie, just letting you know. That will be about a couple of local brewers, Memphis Made, which has been one of the godfathers of local brewing, and then Maroon Brew Company, which is opening any week or day now. In Collierville, that's right. We recently had Philip Ashley from Philip Ashley Chocolates on. If you missed that, it was a great conversation about all kinds of wonky things about chocolate and politics and just how do you ship chocolate in a burning hot summer, which I'd never thought about. We also recently had Pedro Velasquez from LifeDoc and their mission of helping people throughout the city in the area who can't otherwise maybe afford good healthcare. It was a really great, interesting conversation. I should also mention Behind the Headlines, which we do with the folks over at WKNO every Friday. Recently had Reginald Coopwood, the head of Regional 1, talking about their goal to renovate and expand the campus, as well as turn Regional 1 into an academic medical center in partnership with UT. And also a few weeks ago, we had Robert Connect from the city of Memphis talking about, among other things, potholes, but not enough about potholes because it was really fascinating. But we ran out of time. But you can go back and get that at the Daily Memphian site or at WKNO.org. And this week, we've got a show on mental health in the Justice Center and all those complicated, difficult challenges with the criminal justice system. But we are here with Ned Canty and Dennis Whitehead Darling talking about La Bohème. Now I'm just getting cocky.
I know.
Now I'm just like, I can just say that word. I barely even have to read it phonetically off my notes.
Yeah.
The performance is coming up May 17th and May 18th at the Scheidt Family Performing Arts Center. People can go to Opera Memphis, search for Opera Memphis to get tickets.
Yeah,
I believe.
operamemphis.org, or you just Google Opera Memphis, it'll take you right there.
Right now, we're less than 2 weeks from the performance, so you're very nice to be here doing this because it's got to be a stressful time. I'll go to, either of you. Like at this point in the production, as someone who's I've been around productions but never an opera production. Right now, are you just losing your mind? Are you sleepless? Are you exhausted?
Yes, all of those things.
Yeah.
This one is a tricky one. I did a COVID version of this where we had no chorus in it, and it was simply the main story that we told. And I'll never forget that moment I opened up my libretto or my score and saw Act 2 and saw this huge chorus moving about the stage, action happening simultaneously, soloist singing here, chorus moving here, and I just sent this panic message to Ned. Oh my God, Act 2, there's a chorus. And he said, it'll all be fine.
You'll be fine. It's a marathon. It's the 5K of any opera director staging this particular act. It's just very complex, and you have to make sure that the right people make it to the right person to to sing to them. But he actually knocked it out more quickly than I did my first time around.
So let's get in the weeds on that. About how many people are in the performance?
So we have 20, I believe, in the
20 adult chorus, 10 kids chorus, one supernumerary, so someone who doesn't sing, just an actor who plays the proprietor of a cafe, and then principals. We have 8 principal singers. So that's 38 people on stage, 39 people on stage.
And the crew is how many more?
So crew is
Give or
on
take.
stage about 7 or 8, and then orchestra of I think about 40 in the pit, and the conductor, and then another 7 front of house. So
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of people.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I only have to manage the people on the stage.
Still, though, but all of it's got to work at peak
Absolutely.
moments. Virtually, I assume everyone has to work in harmony, literally. But also, when do you get started? Like, again, this was a little fits and starts because of the COVID delays, but about how much time goes into preparing for this?
So we, looking at productions for next year, we did the auditions for next year's shows back in December. So the casting process begins then.
So that would be December 23. You're
Correct.
beginning to do rehearsals for.
We're casting for shows that we're doing in 2024, 2025.
Gotcha.
So that is just to make sure, opera, a lot of the opera singers that we work with tend to get booked several years in advance. So if we want to get the best possible people, we need to try to get in the right window. And that gets complicated. People like Chauncey Parker, who is singing the male lead in Bohème, we had to work around his schedule at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. And so he came here for 2 days, flew back to New York for 2 days, came back here for the rest of the rehearsal. So that part of it can get complicated.
At any point, did you just say to him, well, forget about that whole Metropolitan Opera thing?
I know.
Like, why? Get your priorities straight. No?
Well,
it didn't come up?
We've been lucky in Memphis that for a lot of singers, the Met is kind of the equivalent of a Marvel movie. Like, it's a great big action summer blockbuster, pays your mortgage for the year, and then we're the indie. Like, we're the thing that they will come down and they will do for love, for the purity of intent, because, for whatever the concept may be, whatever our approach to it is, the number one thing is that this Bohème is informed by as pure an understanding of what this opera is about, what the music is about, as we can achieve. And that, that idea, that process, that study, for us, for the singers, that starts a year, 2 years in advance, to get back to your question. Designers are usually hired 9 months to a year out. Their designs are finalized several months out. So we had the costume designs for this we had in January or February. And even that was actually pretty late for us. But the first conversations happened in spring of last year. We started talking about the approach, doing the research. We were meeting with the Blues Foundation to talk about 1915 music on Beale Street back in June of last year. So that whole process takes usually at least a year. So there's a lot that goes into it.
In terms of rehearsals and the cast, that it's an all-black cast, was that a draw for some? I mean, did that make it? I don't know how often that happens in opera. How did that whole dynamic play out?
Well, that has never happened in my career, as short as it is, since 2017. But speaking with some of the singers, it's rare. It's very rare. And so there's a wonderful feeling when we're having our first sing-along, first rehearsal where we're all singing together, and you look around the room and everyone is of color, and it's like, wow, this never happens in opera. So it's very exciting.
Yeah.
And I think, it is an approach. I mean, it happens with certain operas like Porgy and Bess are sort of obvious, and there are certain companies that specialize in doing it the way that Hattie Lou or Collage, that's a part of their identity. It's not something that we've ever done. And the wonderful thing about opera is that the quality of the singers who are out there, I mean, it's wonderful for us when we're casting because we have so many fantastic options. This cast is one of the best that we've put together. But it's just for every role that we cast, there are probably 25 singers that I personally know who I could cast in that role. There's probably another 250 represented by agents who could do the role. And then there's probably another 500, this is for every single role, another 500 I've never even met who would, and all of them would be at the top of their game. And then that's not even talking about, well, who's our backup, you know? And they're just, for any particular role that a singer auditions for, there are thousands of singers who want that role. Just like with acting, it's very competitive. But what that means is when we want to do something like this, we can start. You know, it would be the same as if I said, you know, I only want to do it with singers who are shorter than 6 foot. I could cast any show in a half a day with, you know, only people who are blonde, only whatever. Like, that's kind of the abundance of singers who are out there, which again is a double-edged sword. It means that we can do something that is fantastic opera, but also take this special, very targeted approach that speaks to the heart of Memphis. We can do that while also maintaining just the excellence of this piece, which is really one of the great works of art. I mean, it is Casablanca. It is season 1 of The Sopranos. It is, you know, The Nutcracker, you name it. It is something that has lasted for as long as it has because it speaks to very basic human experiences. Yesterday, we were looking at, Dennis was staging Act 3, where 2 of the characters who we've watched fall in love in Acts 1 and 2, where they break up. And it's so human and so realistic, where they start to break up and she says to him, well, just put my things, wrap them up, and I'll send a friend to pick them up. But if you want to keep that one thing that you bought me on our first date, if you want to keep that, you can keep it. And then he says, you know, it's winter. It's so depressing. It's really so depressing to be alone. And they start talking and they end up not breaking up, because breaking up is hard. And anyone who's done it knows that it's hard. And they end up staying together because, you know, it's less lonely. I mean, it's just very human ideas. I think when people think of opera, they think of, you know, the big things. And the fact is that all of us have emotions in our lives that are operatic. All of us have had experiences that are as big as any opera. And these people are having similar experiences to things that almost all of us have gone through: falling in love, falling out of love, fighting and saying the most horrible thing to the person you love the most and not being able to take it back. Like, that is what this opera is about. And that's why it's lasted for so long.
Yeah. With 4 or 5 minutes left here, what else, as you look into the fall, this is the last of the season, or I'm going to say that wrong,
Yes.
the last performance of the season.
Last performance of the
then
season, correct.
Get a bit of a break through the summer and then into the fall and
Yes.
doing what?
So I think we'll be announcing our season soon. We will be doing, I think they've already announced we'll be doing the Mozart Requiem and some excerpts of Mozart's operas with the symphony. We've been doing a once a year collaboration with them. I think the biggest thing, at least in the fall, is that September 5th of this year will be the 365th day of 30 Days of Opera, the program that we started in my first full year here. And that's very exciting for us.
Yeah,
you know, we're creeping up. We're up to almost 500,000 people we've reached with free opera, and reaching that year milestone for us is just very meaningful. I think it's something that we're going to definitely be celebrating.
We've talked about it, we mentioned it a couple times lately with various folks who've been on Sidebar, with the whole notion of taking art to people where they are. You know, the Shell now has its kind of mobile, the ability to get out there if people can't get to it. There was another group the woman who's the Shelby County Arts and Culture Liaison. They're trying to do more things where they bring the art to people who otherwise can't get to it. But you were very groundbreaking in that from, you know, when that started. So.
I think, you know, I was fortunate to grow up in and around New York City, and the public transit there meant that both me and my friends, you know, if you wanted to do something, you could get there for $1 and more today. But here, you know, I sometimes will encourage my staff to look at where a performance is and then just drop a pin somewhere in Memphis where we wish people would come and see how long it would take you to get there. It might be a 15-minute drive and a 2-hour bus ride.
Yeah.
And if we don't address that, then none of us are doing our jobs. And I will say that mayor's commission is something I've been a part of, and I think they are very aware of this idea of how do we, if the goal is to make sure that everybody has access to great art, and I think all of us agree that is the goal, because a great city is defined not just by having great art, but by the ability of its people to access that art. If we all agree on that, well, then we need to work with MATA. We need to figure out how to ensure that transit is not the obstacle. Some of that is spreading the wealth a little bit more, getting outside the Poplar Corridor for all the things that we do. So that's been important to me really since I got here. And it's always nice to watch other companies copy our idea, sometimes with our blessing and sometimes without. And it's always nice to see them succeed. And when they haven't sought our blessing, occasionally satisfying to see them fail.
Real talk.
Yeah,
it is what it is.
We'll just be,
Let me go to Dennis with just a minute left here. When you're not directing and putting on this production of La Bohème, are you still at U of M? Are you teaching? What else? Talk about your other endeavors.
I am a freelance director. So I graduated in 2018 and moved to Philadelphia.
Okay.
And since I graduated, I have been working pretty consistently in opera and in theater.
Okay. Other productions?
Oh my goodness. I've done The Anonymous Lover at Boston Lyric. I did a new work called Marion's Song at Houston Grand Opera.
Madame Butterfly.
I just did Madame Butterfly at Opera Carolina. Which they're bringing me back to do, guess what? La Bohème.
Oh, yeah, there you go. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Again, just a minute left here, and I always try to ask people, and I think I've asked Ned in the past, but it was a while ago. I was trying to ask people the first concert they went to, which for y'all will be very interesting. What's the first concert?
First concert I chose to go to
with
friends, Madonna, with the Beastie Boys opening for them before their first album came out.
Wow.
When it was just the Cookie Puss EP. So nobody knew who the heck they were.
Where was it?
It was at Madison Square Garden.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
I think it was the Cars.
Oh, cool. That's a first.
Yeah.
Where would that have been, do you think?
In Texas.
In Texas. Okay. The Cars. Those are good. Those are very good ones.
Yeah.
Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Again, Ned Canty and Dennis Whitehead Darling. La Bohème is playing May 17th and May 18th at the Shipe Family Performing Arts Center. You can go to operamemphis.org and you can get tickets there. Thank you both very much for being here. That is all the time. If you missed any of the show, you can get the full episode at WYXR or the Daily Memphian or wherever you get your podcasts. Do turn into the Sidebar every Thursday at 11:30 on WYXR 91.7, or again, you can get the full podcast focused on arts, culture, everything in between. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next week.